Matthew starts us off. He says this: when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. And when he had got into the boat, his disciples followed him. I think that is a great way to start a journey. Jesus instructed, Jesus gave a word, Jesus gave direction, and the disciples, they decided it would be great if we follow. And so maybe we need to have God in our life giving instruction and following. And so in this specific incident, they were following exactly what they were supposed to do, and they were on the path that God had called them to. And so they got into the boat. And then we see the next thing they knew, suddenly they were in a severe storm. Waves were crashing in the boat, and he, that is Jesus, was sound asleep. I wonder how many of us feel that way sometimes. There's a storm all around us. And it almost feels like Jesus is asleep. Like, where are you, God? Where are you in the midst of the storm in my life? The waves are crashing. It's overtaking me. I don't know how to have victory in this thing. And I just need you right now. And Jesus is asleep. Remember that they were doing exactly what God told them to do. They weren't outside of the will of Jesus. Jesus instructed them, get in the boat and go to the other side. So this storm hit them while they were busy doing what he had asked them to do. So nothing outside of his will there. We see 3 different occurrences or 3 retellings of this in the Bible. Matthew, Mark, and Luke each write about this. Now they write obviously from their own perspective and the way that they saw things and how they remember it when they wrote it down. And maybe also they're just writing from the perspective of knowing who they're writing to, who the audience is going to be, irrespective of whether it was their perspective or whether they were trying to convey a message. We have 3 different perspectives. And I love it when we have that in the Word, because when we can look and get a bigger picture of what happened there and what the situation was. The only one here that wasn't present is Matthew. Matthew only comes into his own story in the next chapter. So he's writing based on the information he got from the other disciples. So I almost see Matthew is representing for us the other disciples, those that haven't written an epistle. And so Matthew relates this story to us. But the other 2 write about it as well. And they have just a little bit of twist on how they convey it to their audience. The first we saw in Matthew said that the disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." So Matthew there says, Lord. And in the process of saying Lord, he recognizes that this is someone that is supreme in authority. And so Matthew is shouting to Lord, who is supreme in authority. Mark says something different. He says, Teacher, don't you care that we are going to drown? Mark is speaking to a teacher. The word that is used there refers to an instructor or a doctor or a teacher. And then Luke writes, and he says, Master, Master, we're going to drown. And this master word refers to a superintendent or an overseer. And so you can see the 3 of them have 3 different perspectives on what's happening here. Matthew, talking on behalf of the other disciples and the knowledge they gained, says Lord. And so it can be, Jesus can be Lord to you today. Or otherwise, they speak as a teacher. And so maybe he's just an instructor. Or Luke speaks as master. Maybe he's just an overseer. And so they respond maybe to him in that manner. I see Matthew recalling and thinking of the disciples going, Lord, Lord, you're the only one that can get us out of this. But then Mark, on the other hand, he's just saying, Teacher, show me. What do I need to do? How do I need to get out of this thing? What is the next step that we need to take? And then Luke, being a doctor himself, he's like, I got it. That's fine. Master, just want you to know, by the way, we're drowning. Just information. Just want you to know that we're drowning. And so sometimes we maybe need to look at how we see Jesus, and we'll look at that a little bit later. Let's see Jesus' response to them. Jesus responds in the following way. He says, why are you afraid? And I'm sitting there, I'm going, these guys are caught in a storm. And remember, the storm wasn't strange to them. Because most of these guys were fishermen. They were used to storms. They were out on the water a lot. Or if they weren't a fisherman, they lived around the lake. And so they would have to cross every now and then. And so they were probably all used to storms. So this must have been quite a severe storm to get them to be afraid. And Jesus is saying, why are you afraid? And I think they're going, Jesus, I think you need to wipe the sleep from your eyes because you can't see around you. We are caught in a big thing right here. But Jesus says, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. And then goes on to say, then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. I'm thinking, why? Does not draw your attention? Jesus sent them out. It was his plan that they had gone out. He knew there was a storm coming, but he goes to sleep. Leaves them to deal with things. And then when they wake him up, he goes, oh, guys, why are you afraid? Why is your faith so small? I'm thinking Jesus is, and then he goes, okay, storm, just die down. Just get calm. These guys don't know how to deal with it. I'm thinking there might be a lesson that's coming here. That maybe Jesus is trying to teach them something. And maybe in our lives we get caught up in a storm. And maybe things go rough. And maybe we're shouting out, Jesus, where are you? Save us. Get us out of this predicament. Get us out of this thing. Save us from this thing. Why don't you see what is happening? Why don't you give attention to the process that's going on in my life? Luke gives a bit of a different, well, let me read this first. It says, the disciples were amazed. They said, who is this man? They asked. Because even the winds and the waves obey him. Remember that at this time, Jesus had not revealed who he is yet. They don't see him as the Son of God yet. This is just an awesome teacher. He preaches well. He draws people to him. They might have seen a miracle or two. And so they know there's something different about him. And they want to follow him. But they don't know that he's God's Son just yet. So to them, who is this man? Just a man. Luke writes it this way. I want you to turn to your partner and say, ouch, this might hurt. Because Jesus says this to them, according to Luke's recollection. He says, and he said to them, why are you so fearful? Where is your faith, your trust, your confidence in me, in my veracity, in my integrity? Why can't you trust me? And I think I'm reading that and I'm going, God, I'm so sorry. I should have just trusted that you were there. You will never leave me or forsake me. You promised me. You told me in your word that those that are for me are more than those that are against me. You said that I'm the head and not the tail, that you'll always be there by my side. You'll never let me go. I'm so sorry, I failed it again. I want to have faith, but I missed it. Jesus said, why can't you trust me? So Jesus is beside them in the storm. And as I said, the storm was something that they should have known about. They should have understood about a storm, and it shouldn't have maybe brought as much fear in them. But maybe because of Jesus' presence there, they went, wait a minute, this guy can do a lot. Let's call him. Let's see if he can help us out of this situation. So they did the right thing. They called on God. They called on Jesus in the moment when fear struck and when things came across their path. Let's fast forward. Let's bounce from Matthew 8 to 14. Next occurrence. We read there, it says, immediately after this. Now, after this year is referring to the feeding of the 5,000. So this is the moment that Jesus did one of the greatest miracles that you could witness with your eyes. Taking a couple of fish and loaves, multiplying it to feed 5,000 men, plus their ladies and their kids. A lot of people were fed from that. Now, the picture I have in my mind is not that the disciples ran to Jesus. Jesus can have a piece of bread, and then ran and gave a piece. Around here at the moment, we're probably about just over 1,000 people. So imagine 5 times this, plus kids, plus children. So imagine about 10 times maybe what we have right here now. I won't go and take a piece and then run. Mollen, here's your piece. And then go, Jesus, can I have another piece? And then run to the next one. So I believe what happened was Jesus said, here, go feed. And as they fed, it just multiplied. And as they gave to the next one, it just multiplied. And they witnessed the most amazing thing. What's happening? It's not getting less. God's supplying. And it's just keeping on, and it's just keeping on, and it's just keeping on. And as they're handing out to them, maybe in this row, it's going to stop in this row, but there's more, and there's more. And it just keeps on going. And so they saw this amazing miracle, and it says immediately after this. So they just picked up the 12 baskets, and now they're going out on the boat. Immediately, this is still fresh in their minds. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that the disciples get back in the boat and cross to the other side of the lake. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting the heavy waves. Sounds like a similar situation to you? Something they might have been in before? Just look to your neighbor and say, it's that time again. It's that time again. It's that another opportunity. Now we can apply what we've learned. You ever been in that situation where you feel like this? I've been in this boat before. I've seen this come around before. I should know how to deal with this thing. I've seen it. I've had to deal with my finances in this situation. God brought me out last time. He'll bring me out this time. Ever been in that situation? We've had an argument in our relationship. I did it wrong last time. I'm going to do it right this time. And so we get these opportunities where it's that time again, where we get the opportunity to redo and to do it over. And so they are caught for me in a that time again moment. Matthew goes on to say at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "Is it a ghost?" But Jesus spoke to them at once, saying, "Don't be afraid." He said, "Take courage. I am here." I love, love, love those words. Don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here. Whatever you're facing today, I believe Jesus is saying, don't be afraid. Take courage. I am here. He's always there. And so he was there with them. And then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come walking to you on the water." I'm thinking, Peter, you got to love him. He's walking on the water. And he's saying, if it's really you. And so Peter was doubting at that moment, but did the right thing. Because he called out to God and he asked for confirmation. And Peter knew he needed a word. And so Jesus said to him, "Come on." "Yes, come." Jesus said, so Peter went out on the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. And I think that happens with us so many times, is that we're willing to take it on. We're going to do it. We're going to push through this one. But then the wind comes and the waves come. And we start to get terrified within that whole process. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. And Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed his hand, and said, "You have so little faith. Why do you doubt me?" And when they climbed back in the boat, the wind stopped. And I think that's the moment they go, we had the opportunity again. God was in control. Nothing was going on. I was safe. He had me. He saw me. We would have been okay. And then the disciples worshipped him. "You are really the Son of God," they exclaimed. They started realizing who he was and who he was in their life. So this time, Jesus is not in the boat with them, but he's watching them. And we'll see that now. But he still sent them out. He didn't go with them, but he sent them. So they were still caught in a storm while they were in his perfect will. Still doing exactly what he had told them to do, going where he had told them. This time, presumably, Matthew is in the boat with them, and he's like experiencing it now firsthand. I think the last time when the disciples told him, he probably thought, man, if only I could have been there, I would have loved to see Jesus do this. Just calm the storm down. I can't believe that he was able to do that. And so now he gets the opportunity to live this in with them. Mark gives us a little different perspective. And I think it's his perspective that got me to teach on this today. He says this: Jesus was alone on land, and having seen that they were troubled and tormented in their rowing and in the wind again, and the wind was against them. I wonder how many of us feel that we are caught in that. Jesus is there, and we're here, we're rowing, we're caught up in torment, we're caught up in the winds, we're caught up in the storms in our life, and things are just coming against us. And he says about fourth watch of the night, between 3 to 6 a.m. in the morning, he came to them walking directly on the sea, and he acted as if he meant to pass by them. Interesting. He sees them struggling out there, and he goes, I'm not going to let them show I see them. I'm just going to walk right by them. That drew my attention. Why would Jesus do that? Why would he try and walk by? Let's look at some other translations, if that's what they say as well. In the NLT, it says he intended to go past them. But then they saw him walking on the water. The picture I get here is, sometimes I've done this with my sons. They're older now, so I don't do it that much anymore. But we live on a plot, as many of you know, and they just mess around on the plot many times. So they do some stuff. So sometimes they'll ask me, how do I build this thing? So when they started using a hammer or a drill or whatever it is, they'd ask me, I'd show them, and then they're ready. But then I'd watch and I see, these guys are busy doing some of that stuff that I taught them. And I'd go and I'd place myself somewhere around a corner. And I'll just check them out. I'll just make sure I'm close by. If something goes wrong, I'm going to be there. And they might be building something. They might be practicing sports. Or they might be playing with each other. But things aren't going 100% the way they wanted to in the game that they're playing. Or anything like that. And I'll just position myself and I'll just watch them. And I'll just see if everything's going okay. I know that I can leave them because I've prepped them. I've given them what they need to be able to complete this task. But I just want to be sure they don't hurt themselves. And this is a picture I see with Jesus. I've been with them in a storm. I've shown them how they can overcome the storm. Just call out to me. I'll calm the storm. And the storm won't overtake them. So they should know how to deal with this one. But I'm just gonna walk past and just check them out. And so I believe that God gives us these opportunities in our life, that we can apply the things that come. And so we just need to trust that God's got his hand on us, that he's looking after us, and that never mind what the storm is, never mind what it feels like, he's there. He might not be visible. He might not be visible, but he's there. He's watching. Now, what happened there with Jesus is what happens sometimes with me. It says there that when they saw him walking on the water, and I'll be there and I'll hide away and I'll try to let them not see me. I'm sitting behind. And then they'll look around. Dad, come, help. Come help us here. The moment they see me, they stop trying. And they just give it over to me. And so that's why I think God sometimes to us feels like he's not there. Because I know for my boys that if they can work through this thing, the victory that they'll feel, the confidence that they build, the faith that will be established within them. If they just work through this thing, I'm not going to allow them to get hurt. I'm there. I'll protect them. They won't get hurt. But I want them to have victory in it. I want them to go to the next thing. Because a hammer is not enough if you want to build a big thing. You have to learn the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And so you have to have victory over this. And so I believe sometimes in your life you might be facing a storm, and it might be very rough in that moment. But God is there, he's protecting, he's watching us. But he gives us the opportunity to have the victory. And that's why we can be glad for everything that comes our way. Not maybe for the rough stuff that comes, but we can know that he's with us. You see, I see that them being there in this boat, that boat represents our lives. I think the guys have got a clip for us. Can I get in the boat? Do you like my boat? Let me come from the side so I can get in my boat. I'm in my boat. This is for the media guys. Na, 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 na. Okay. So we're in the boat. It's beautiful in the boat. This boat represents my life. I feel safe in my boat. I feel comfortable in my boat. I've been in my boat a few times and I know exactly what to do in my boat. Around me is water. This water for me represents the world around me, represents the people around me. And while everything is going the way it should, I feel safe in my boat. Unless something happens around me. Unless a wind starts to pick up. And when a wind starts to pick up, the water starts to get murky. And things start to get unsettled. And the wind comes in, and I start getting, I don't know what's coming. What's going to happen in my boat? I'm starting to get fearful, and then a storm comes. And the storm builds up, and now I'm not sure about it in the boat anymore. And I start getting unsure about it. Is my boat going to stay up? And my world is starting to rock. And in the uncertainty of what's happening, I start getting fearful, and I go, God, please help me. I don't know what to do in the midst of the storm. How am I going to get out of the storm? Will you keep my boat afloat? Will you please keep me focused on the things that you've got for me? And so in the midst of all of this, in the midst of all the challenges that come my way, in the midst of all the trials that come my way, and where I get fearful within the boat, Jesus is saying, don't be afraid, take courage, I am here. When we get an understanding of this, we can understand why James can write the things he writes. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy." Some translations say, "Count it all joy." Why? Because, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing." Who would love to be perfect and complete, needing nothing? Not perfect in I'm going to do everything right, but perfect in I know what to do. I can deal with it. Don't worry about the storm. I'm cool. I know how to sail through a storm. A storm's not going to throw me. I'm still going to keep on doing what God has called me to. I'm still going to achieve the things that He wants in my life. I'm still going to keep focused to the vision He's given me. Maybe there's a storm. Maybe the world around me is making it difficult for me to focus. But I know God has got me. I can go through this thing. I can have joy within the midst of this because I know He's there. This won't overtake me. And so in the midst of that, my faith can grow. My endurance can grow. Because, the next verse says, "If I need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to me. And He will not rebuke you for asking." Firstly, I love that in the midst of all of that, I can say, "God, just show me how. I want to have victory over this thing. Just show me how. I know You've got me. I know You're protecting me. I know nothing's going to overcome me. But just give me wisdom in the midst of this, of how to apply it properly." Matthew ends off saying, "And He got up and He rebuked the winds and the sea." I love there that He rebuked the winds and the sea. He didn't rebuke the disciples. In that previous verse, we read there that we ask our generous God for wisdom. He won't rebuke you. He won't go, why must I tell you? Why didn't you know how to do it? Come on. You need to get this right now, man. What's wrong with you? No, He's going to give it generously. He'll rebuke the storm that's hitting my life, but not me. In the midst of it, I will receive wisdom. I will receive strength to build through the storm. You can give God a hand for that. I love Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. Take courage." And we need to know that He's here. Always know that He's here. He might be looking from the sidelines because He knows what's better, but He is always here. He's never going to leave you or forsake you. They now refer to Him as the Son of God. You are really the Son of God. But this is even before Jesus reveals to Peter that He is the Messiah, or where He asks them that question. So they started realizing who God was in their life. This whole process that we spoke about today, getting it right, trusting God, all of that can only start once we start realizing who He is in our life. That He is the Almighty God. That He's got our hands on us. That He does love us. That He made us the way that we are. That He doesn't want you any different. Maybe He wants you to apply things different, but who you are is who He made you to be. And that He's got a plan and a purpose for you that was preset. He knew you before you were in your mother's womb. He says that every hair on your head is counted. He loves you just the way you are. And He goes one better. One that we can't always say. I love you, but God also likes you. That's awesome. A lot of people I love, I don't necessarily like everybody. Sorry. Just being honest. But God's really for us. So there's a few things that we can take from this today. A few things that we can learn from this process. First thing is, they were sent out by Jesus. So they were in the perfect will of God in that moment. The second big important thing is that they followed. They didn't make their own plans. They didn't do their own things. They fell in line with Jesus. They followed and got in the boat with Him. Then I can see that the storm came suddenly. They weren't prepped for it. They weren't ready. Your next storm, sorry to tell you, there will be a next storm. Your next storm might come suddenly. You might not be prepped. That's why it is so important to learn from your previous times. Because if you learn from the previous time and you set certain things in motion in your life, this will be the way I speak when that comes. This will be the way I love when somebody treats me the way I don't want to be treated. This will be the way that I apply my faith. This is how I will show that I'm a follower of Christ when the work people around me think that I'm stupid to follow Him. This is the answer I'll give when people say, why do you give into that? Use your finances for your own thing. This is the way that I'll be ready to deal with it when it comes. Then the storm can come suddenly because I can deal with it. Otherwise, it catches us off guard. So the storms come suddenly. Then they did an important thing. They called on Jesus in the midst of the storm. And then it's so great to know that it is possible to overcome the storm. The storms don't have to overcome us, but we can overcome the storms. Do what Jesus said. Take courage in the midst of the storm. In other words, pull up your straps. We're going to stand in this one. We're going to build our endurance. We're going to trust God through this. We're going to push through this thing. We're not going to allow it to overtake us. We're going to build courage within it. And then you can step out in the midst of the storm. You don't have to bunker down. You don't have to go, oh, there's a storm. We can't do anything. We have to step back. No. In faith. If God calls you and He says, yes, come, then get out the boat and go do what you need to do. Because even if there's a storm, God can still take you to where you want to go. I always think that that's probably one of the things Peter is not too happy about in his life. He didn't get the opportunity to finish that journey again. He got to walk back with Jesus, though, back into the boat. So that was awesome. But he didn't get to complete it, walking to Him. And then the last thing, so important, that Jesus is always there, always observing, always got His hand on us. I want to close with this. Jesus said the same thing to them twice. The first is, why are you afraid? And so this morning, maybe the storm that you're facing is bringing some fear. Be careful of the fear. Because Satan works exactly in the opposite manner than God. And so where God brings faith, Pastor Donovan taught us, same definition, faith and fear. Believing is something that's not as if it is. And so the enemy perverts it. And he wants us to start walking in fear. Believing in things that are not as if it is. I can't overcome the storm. It's too big for me. I can't stand in it. I don't have the strength. I can't push through. I don't know what to do in the midst of this. Those are the things the enemy wants us to focus on. God wants us to walk in faith. So don't be afraid. Don't let fear step in. Stand up. Be like David. David encouraged himself in the Lord. Say, God, I know you're with me. I know your promises are true. I know that you will always be with me. I know that you have brought me through this before and that you will bring me through this again. And then the second thing is, he said, where is your faith? Now that can be a possessional thing. In other words, where's your faith? Have you lost your faith? Has your faith been hurt? Don't you have the faith with you to carry you? But I think more relevant to our teaching today, it's more a directional kind of question. Where's your faith? Who is your faith in? Is your faith in a teacher that you are just hoping will give you direction and don't know whether he can save you? Is it the overseer, a master? You're just letting him know, well, I'm in trouble, and so that you know I'm in trouble, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of this thing. Or I'm in trouble, but don't worry, I can do it all on my own. Or is it his Lord? Shout out to Lord, the supreme authority. And say, God, I know that in the midst of this, you're with me. That's why I can make it. You see, we need to be careful of those two pure points of view. Because it might sound like I'm not speaking the same language when I say that we have to go through on our own. When I go through on my own, I know it's with the knowledge that God is carrying me. It's not because of me. When I'm standing here this morning, talking with you, this is not me. This is God, I need your strength. I need you to guide. I need you to put words in my heart and in my mouth. I need you to carry through this thing. But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep on. I'm going to prep. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to be there. I'm going to arrive. I'm going to do what needs to be done. I'm going to push through this thing. I'm going to give it the best that I've got. But I know that it can't be successful without you. And so when we in this moment, when our faith is directioned at Lord, our faith is directioned at that. At knowing that we're going to give it all we got. But there's no way we can make it without Him. And so we need Him in our life today.